this is a community cultivator event, and the goal is to create safe conversation. So the subtitle is we're using connection and civility to reduce polarizing political discourse. So we want people talking and loving on each other, even if they're coming from opposite ends of the spectrum.
Especially on Mondays, right? Because we get the case on the Mondays, and research actually shows that people want to nest more on Sundays and Mondays still, even in our fast-paced technological culture. If you haven't figured it out already, my name is Dr. Krystal White, and I am the founder of the nonprofit that has coordinated this event. It's called the Community Cultivator event. And the purpose of our nonprofit is to redesign leadership in a form of our personal relationships in our local communities. Because we believe that the most influential leaders of our lives, in your life, you probably know them personally. No matter where you met them, you know who they are personally. And the truth is that we are awesomely influenced by the people that we call friends, by the people we call mentor, by the people that we call our coaches. So tonight, that's all of you. And I really do feel inspired and honored that you chose to say yes. And that means something in the term of social capital. So if you don't know me, you don't know what we're about ready to do. But everybody else who does knows that we're ready to do a check-in. And a check-in is something that you're never going to forget, and you're always going to do when you have events of your own, or people over for dinner, or you run any training or meeting. So how that works is that you need to be in a group of 2 other humans. That means that there are 3 people per your group. And one person from your group will come up here and grab your prompt. Kevin has it in the back. He's right over there. So one, you have to find 2 other humans that you did not come with tonight. And you will have this prompt, and it has all the directions and guidance that you need on here. And then we will then call you into the theater, either from my very enunciated voice, you'll hear me call you into the theater, or we'll flash the lights. And then that's your cue to go in the theater and take your seats. Okay, so if you would love to form groups of 3, find 2 other humans you didn't come with, and then one of your people will come and either grab this from myself or Kevin in the back of the room.
I didn't come with you.
We'll see you in about 10 minutes.
And each person answer the prompt below. Please don't offer questions or comments after a person shares. Just listen. Wait until everyone has shared before commenting or having a group conversation. Share something important about how politics has recently impacted your life.
I was in Asheville for 2 years, so I'm from here, never experienced a hurricane like I did in Asheville. So I'm back here. And just to keep it pretty light, my answer to, well, it's not that light actually. My answer to the second question is it affects my conversation with my family. It's really prickly. It's on the edge of hostile. Just everybody's trying to button it up around each other. So that's been really hard. I have a big family. I have 4 siblings, nieces and nephews everywhere, all ages. Yeah, it's crazy.
Politics is, I'm from Tampa, and politics, like you, affects, everything, friends and family, so, yeah.
I am Evan. I am an RBT. I'm a registered behavioral therapist. I work at an autism therapy center. I call myself a political junkie. I can't stop consuming news from all the sources, and it's because I'm genuinely interested in it. But it's forced me to learn about the world. Trump himself definitely got me into politics, because even at 18 I knew this is a little bit different. So it kind of drew me in around high school, around college.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for the introduction, Krystal. And I'm just so fascinated with everything that's taken place this evening, from the collective conversations that we've already had. I call it the pregame, right? The warm-up. You all have already been engaging in conversations, and so now we're going to take it to the next level, right? We've kind of given you the appetizers. Now we're going to get into the meat of the entree, the conversation. We're going to have some uncomfortable conversations, and sometimes we have to step outside of our comfort zone and be politically incorrect sometimes in order to actually address the root cause of systemic issues. And so that's what we're going to do, and we have an amazing panel today. And I just want to introduce myself. My name is City Council Member Corey Gibbons Jr. I represent the 7th District, one of the newly elected council members and the youngest council member. My district encompasses some of the highest concentration of poverty, some of the highest concentration of youth live in my district in South St. Petersburg. It includes neighborhoods like Childs Park, the Jordan Park Housing Development, and so many other areas. You know, it's important for me, being a fourth generation St. Petersburg native, to make sure that we bring the community together. I believe in unity in community, and so my goal as a council member is to unite St. Pete. So I'm so grateful that Shane Needham has invited me tonight to moderate this conversation. And without further ado, I want to introduce our panelists. So we'll start immediately to my right with Ms. Jennifer White.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer Webb. I am a former state legislator. I represented West St. Pete all the way to the beaches, from Tierra Verde all the way up to the Bel Airs. And I currently run a statewide project with former Representative Kurt Kelly, a Republican from Ocala, for the Carter Center, helping people to come together to civilly engage in discourse and to promote trust and faith in our democratic processes, and ultimately to reduce the likelihood of partisan-based violence. So that's one of the, I spend a lot of my time doing that. I also am the CEO of Live Tampa Bay, which is a nonprofit coalition focused on reducing the number of overdoses in the area. Those are my two main projects right now, and I'm happy to be here with all of you.
Yeah, my name is Joe Hamilton. It's nice to see you. I'm an entrepreneur. We have a few projects that are all kind of based around community capacity building, efficiency. A lot of that's in communications, which I think is why I'm here. I started the St. Pete Catalyst, St. Petersburg Press, and working on a civic media platform now called Cityverse, which is sort of like a civic utility meets social media platform for cities, which I think can help really improve our communications rails. And also the St. Petersburg Foundation, we do operate some things for the county, including the Leoman Exchange and a few other places.
Evening. Oh, my voice is so loud. I'm Kimberly Jackson. I am an attorney. I'm an educator. I'm an advocate for persons with disabilities. In my day job, I run Congressman Young's think tank. To be clear, for this evening, I'm here in my personal capacity as Kimberly Jackson. Let me see. I serve on a lot of boards in the community because I care about the sustainability of families and how we leave our footprint. And that's a little bit on me.
My name is Darrell Paulson. I have the distinction of being the oldest person on the panel here. So that gives me wisdom, I hope, or at least I hope you think I have some wisdom by the time the program's over. I'm a professor of government at the University of South Florida. I've been retired already for 15 years. I have a PhD from Florida State University in government. I actually taught my first year at Florida A&M University in 1973. Very interesting experience. I've always been interested in black politics and civil rights. I was hired at the University of South Florida to teach a course in Southern politics, and from that I developed another course in Florida politics, and from that I developed another course in St. Pete politics. So I covered the gamut from local to state to national political issues. But most of my writing has been in the area of civil rights and black politics, a lot of things related to school desegregation, desegregation of swimming facilities in St. Pete. I have the distinction, I guess it is, or at least I like to think it is, after spending 35 years at the University of South Florida. By the time I retired in 2009, I was interviewed over 7,500 times by the media. Now, that's a lot. And I think there are two reasons for that. One is I hope I had something interesting to say, and so people who called me kept calling back, which happened to be the case in many instances. But secondly, I was also one of the few political scientists who was a Republican and a conservative. And there weren't a lot of those around. And so when the media wanted to do a story on a particular issue, they would get the Democratic person, and they'd do the write-up and say, this is John Smith, professor of government at such and such a university. And then they would do my write-up, and they would say, this is Darrell Paulson, professor of government at the University of South Florida, and he's a Republican. And it was like an identifying mark that, I was somebody, be a little suspect here, he's one of those guys. In fact, more than once I was called one of those guys. But the strange thing was, and I was very proud of the fact that I had more of my students, I remember one student in particular, who sent me a letter that she had sent to her mother back home. She said, I'm taking this wonderful course in Southern politics. And it's from a professor, a very liberal professor, and I enjoyed learning all about civil rights and black history from this professor. I thanked her for sharing the letter with me and told her there's only one mistake. I'm not a liberal professor. I'm in fact a conservative, and I was a fellow at the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C., one of the conservative think tanks. Yeah, I promise I'm just about done, but it was very unusual to combine those two areas of civil rights politics, black politics, and being a Republican and a conservative. And it would cause me problems in my career always, especially when in 1992 and numerous other times, I was hired about 10 different times by the state NAACP and the national NAACP to represent them on voting rights cases and reapportionment in the state of Florida. And I testified in 1992 at a federal district court case in Tallahassee where the legislature, then controlled by Democrats, refused to draw the congressional district lines in the state of Florida. Something that, as far as I know, had never been done before, because they love drawing congressional districts and making friends. Well, that year, they didn't draw the district lines because the Democrats were afraid of offending African Americans in Florida, who said, we want 4 congressional districts for blacks. There were no blacks in Congress in the state of Florida. In fact, there hadn't been a black member of Congress since the 1880s. It was a 116-year period without a black member in Congress. During much of that period, half the population of Florida was black, and yet there was not a black politician. And so I was honored to be hired by the NAACP on those multiple occasions, and as a result of my testimony in 1992, and obviously not just my testimony, and testimony of many others, a federal court judge drew the congressional district lines, and we ended up with the first black member of Congress in 116 years. In fact, not just one, but we ended up with 3 black members of Congress. And ever since that point, there's been 3 black members of Congress in the state of Florida. So I like to surprise people a lot, and that's been probably the biggest surprise for many people. You can be a Republican and a conservative, and you can support civil rights, and I see no inconsistency at all in that, and that's something I hope we'll get a chance to talk about. So thanks a lot.
We certainly will. We certainly will. Can we give our panelists a hand, please? as you can see, we have well over a century of wisdom and experience in government and politics, in the political system, in civic engagement. And so I'm honored to be sitting here on this platform with these individuals. We want to get right into the conversation. And I want to start the conversation probably right along the lines of your tie, Professor Paulson. Right? How do we bring Republican and Democrat together, and how has Republican and Democrat divided us, right? The polarization challenge. That conversation is something that is needed, especially this day and age, after the election last year, right? Even the election in 2020, I would say that's what started it. In 2016, beyond that. But our country in the last 10 years has taken a direction, whether it be for the better or for the worse, towards the extreme, right? We have gone towards these extreme ideologies. That's what polarization is, right? You have diverted from the middle towards the left or the right. Be it right, be it wrong. We have gone beyond just the middle, right? And we have now started embracing these polarized opposites. So I want to talk for just a moment about how the political system this day and age, in 2025, how polarization has impacted our personal lives. So my first question is, what's one way that politics has impacted your life personally and recently? And we can start that conversation with whoever. Not all at once.
I think that part of the problem is politics and polarization don't have to be one and the same thing. And so I think really starting by kind of unpacking that a little bit, because when I don't know about y'all, but if I hear like polarization, I think things that come to my mind are people aren't going to listen, they're talking at me, they're not to me or with me. They're almost like speaking from talking points from, the media outlets that are segregated along political lines. But if I think of politics, I think of how we come together I think politics is like the art of negotiation, coming together to problem solve for the benefit of Floridians. In our case, here in Florida, folks in the U.S. And so politics touches my life every day. I mean, I work in helping to reduce the number of people dying from overdose. Like, there's a lot of leveraging power across different sectors to come together. It doesn't have anything to do with ideology or polarization. It has to do with bringing people together to move the ball down the field. And I think a lot of our panelists here today are highly effective at that. Regardless of whether it's building a building or launching a paper or overseeing an important center or whatever. And so I think that for me, so politics does, it touches my life on a daily basis. Partisanship, a little less so now that I'm not in office. And then polarization, it touches me, I think, when I've started to reframe difficult conversations that happen along political ideological lines as like, oh, that's polar, like it almost is now filtered through this understanding that we're have increasing polarization. And that's a difference in me, or like that's a way that I've started to reframe the way I see the world around me. And I don't know that it's necessarily helpful or harmful, but it is a difference that I don't know I recognized prior to 5 years ago. I don't know that if you and I disagreed on something, if I would put that in the polarization bucket, Like I would have just been like, oh, we just disagree on that. And so maybe it's just like another barrier to being able to have authentic conversations and not like retreat to corners. This weekend, over weather, we post, so this weekend, for example, there was a conversation with all of our network members at the Carter Center on how we talk about what the protests in LA and whether we take, do we take the point of view of the official statement of the police department that it was peaceful, or do we look at news coverage and say this wasn't peaceful and therefore the response from the president's administration to nationalize or to mobilize the National Guard. And that was one, I don't know, instance this week where I think there was more of a polarization or a politicization of a response that that may not have happened prior to the heightened polarization of the country. Yeah.
Very well said.
I would agree. Listening is an art and an act, and it's important. And communication, which is what we all do as human beings, is important. And when you constantly have your guard up, then you can't communicate and you cannot listen. So in your daily life, depending on what you do for a living, then that becomes more challenging. So then everything, natural everyday conversations have a tinge of something else, whatever the something else is, even though there are well-intentioned communications. So I think, it just makes life more difficult. And then, from a body posture space, from, people's temperament, it just makes it challenging whether they're having issues, having these difficult conversations with their families or their friends or in the workforce, and then we're all in the same space trying to navigate that in our day-to-day lives. And I think that is the biggest impact, is that it challenges how you move. And it makes you work harder, actually. And then depending on, your personal situation, then that will depend on how you react. And I think that's the biggest change I see in people generally as it relates to the environment we're in.
You may never get this back. I used to tell my class in the opening session of Introduction to Politics class that politics came from that ancient Greek word, poly meaning many, and ticks meaning ugly, blood-sucking parasites. And when I first started teaching, the students laughed and thought, well, this is going to be an interesting course. And then 35 years later, I use the same joke in the class, and the students are jotting it down on their iPad like this is the gospel truth. They really thought that was the definition of politics, ugly, blood-sucking parasites. I mean, because to them it was believable. But politics has fundamentally changed, and not in a good way. It has become far more polarized. You can look at all sorts of indices from political organizations, from journalistic organizations, and they will show you that it's far more polarized today than before. It's even gotten to the point now where individuals say that they would prefer to live with like-minded individuals in their neighborhoods. They're uncomfortable if they have to live with people who hold different views from them, whether it's political views or other views. It's even gotten to the point where most parents now say something that was unthinkable 50 years ago. 50 years ago, they were concerned that their son or their daughter married somebody who they thought was a good person. Today, they're concerned about that, but they're also concerned about whether that person is a Republican or a Democrat. And that's the gospel truth. I mean, studies have proven that parents get very upset if they find out one of their children is marrying one of those. Like the children are going to be infected with some fatal kind of disease. So that's the point that we've gotten in terms of polarization. It's not a good place to be in this country. And I've written several different pieces about political polarization and what's happened. I think the fundamental thing that has changed is that when I started teaching politics 40 years ago, it used to be the case that compromise was a good thing. Republicans and Democrats could work together. In the Republican Party, you had a number of liberal Republicans. In the Democratic Party, you had a number of conservative Democrats. Today, you don't find that. Republicans are staunch Republicans, and if they don't follow the line, they get kicked out. They get primary. So it's just a different entity today in politics, and not a good thing. And we have to get back to the idea that compromise is not a bad thing. I mean, it's just foolishness to think that it is, and yet that's the way that governments operate, whether it's at the federal level, at the state level, or the local level. And people who want to compromise are often chastised and kicked out of the party simply for problems with politics. I wrote one piece that was well received. In fact, I've written about 500 different opinion pieces for the St. Pete Times and other newspapers and for Florida Politics in the United States. And one of the pieces I wrote was a piece called The Lies We Tell Ourselves. And I said the first thing we have to do if we're really concerned about the state of politics and polarization is to look at ourselves, look in that mirror and see whether or not we're not part of the problem. And obviously many people hold the attitudes I just talked about. I think they're part of the problem. But parents always tell their children, I said, that they must respect other individuals, even if they don't look or sound like they do. We must respect their religion, their customs, their ideas, unless, of course, they belong to the other party. So there's always that caveat that comes in, once again, in all sorts of discussions today. And it's a terrible thing, because people oftentimes say in politics, we vote for the best person. How many times have you heard that? I vote for the best man, the best woman. I don't vote for the party. We know, quite frankly, that that's just not true. That overwhelmingly, even today, there's more straight line voting or straight ticket voting than there has been in decades. So people either vote all Republican or all Democrat. So either, once again, they believe that all of the good people are in one party and not the other party, or they're just lying to themselves when they say they're voting for the best person. So that's one of the real big changes. And one of the interesting things when I wrote this piece, I talked about the journalist for the New York Times who criticized a number of people. In fact, he said 63 million people who voted for Donald Trump in 2016. And he said it can't be, as so many of the opponents of Trump have said, it can't be that every person that voted for Donald Trump is a blithering idiot. There must be something that they like in him or that they see in him. And he said, perhaps, this was his suggestion, he said that perhaps it's not such a bad idea to send liberals to Kansas and conservatives to Massachusetts. And I've often said that myself. The problem in politics today is the partisans all look at the same information, so everything gets reinforced. If you're a conservative, you look at conservative news outlets. You look at conservative commentators. You look at conservative blog sites and websites. You look at conservative magazines and newspapers. You look at Fox News. If you're a liberal, you do just the opposite. You look at liberal alternatives to the news. And so everything you hear reinforces your already preconceived notion. And I have suggested to my students at some point in time that they ought to get one of their spouse or relative to tie them in front of a TV set. And if they're a staunch conservative, make them watch liberal media all day. Or vice versa, if they're a liberal, make them watch conservative media.
So Professor Paulson, I want to interject just a moment, and if I can have Joe kind of chime in here. As somebody who's a part of the news media, you have your own podcast, you do a number of different things, you publish your own newspaper. How do we get away from that fear of sharing our political views? Talking about who we voted for in 2016, 2020, and 2024 without fear of maybe jeopardizing our professional positions or losing credibility in the community that we once thought we were a part of. I'm just interested in your professional opinion there.
It starts with understanding the underlying causes of it. I think sometimes when we talk about behavior, we're almost too late in the human evolution cycle of it. as humans, we're basically input-output machines. Inputs come in through our humanity and come out the other side. And so it's why I almost don't find fault. It's like, a 2-year-old crying, 2-year-olds cry, right? And, I look at, we had this explosion of information with the internet, and it was overwhelming to people. It came very fast. And with that came an explosion of expertise and in very specific perspectives. So you have an issue of any sort, offshore drilling. Offshore drilling, to an environmentalist, they can make a very compelling and true case for why that's a bad thing. To a politician, they can make a very compelling and true case why that's a great tax benefit. To a corporation, to a military person, it's less reliance on foreign oil. And all of those are 100% true. It just depends on which part you're coming from. And so as a general person who cares 0.0001% about offshore drilling, what they developed was using proxies. And this is where the media and social media came into play. And so you relied on people that either were sort of similar to you or that you just felt comfortable with to be a proxy for all of this truth and help you understand it, because there was no possible way you could do it yourself. And kind of what Professor Paulson said is you started to get this, who are the people doing this? They're entertainers, they're media personalities, and they are competing with each other to be your proxy. And then you start to kick in all the, what sells, right? If it bleeds, it leads. Fear is a 10x multiplier, emotion versus positive things. And so that all then, through just the mechanics of communication and competition, started to take us down this road of using proxies that were infusing this energy into us. And with that, we're operating on partial information. We really don't understand what these people, they're saying. We're just saying, of all these people that have true things to say, I'll listen to what this person says. And then what happened as you started to build trust with that one person, you started to, it wouldn't just be offshore drilling, it might be some other subject as well. And they became one of your true sources for information. And again, partial information. So now as they're crossing different parameters in your personality, that's where your identity starts to seep into it, right? And then you introduce the idea of social media. And social media becomes a place where this just goes crazy. And sort of the underlying nefarious element of social media that I don't hear people talk about a lot, is that the energy is built up there, has no place to go, right? You can talk about the war in Ukraine all you want, and you can build up all this energy because these people have an incentive to build this energy up in you. And the only way you can express that energy, you can't affect the war in Ukraine, is to beat somebody verbally on social media. That's it. That's your only chance to really feel like you've expressed this energy and made progress in it.
Keyword bullies, that's what I call them.
Sure. But it's, they're feeling real emotions and trying to satisfy them and stuff. So I think understanding that this whole mechanism has been in place, and understanding why people end up in that place, that's if you treat the underlying cause, because it's hard. Once people's identities are locked in and they're going through the same cycle again, they're going to hear what you have to say and then go back to their person, and you're not going to break that cycle.
Yeah. And I think that's where it starts with the individual breaking the cycle, right? We can't expect our political parties to all get on board with doing the right thing unless it starts with the power of one person to truly impact change. You talked about something earlier, Professor Paulson, about having conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans, and those do exist. But are we willing to embrace those ideals in our own circles? I have seen Democrats kick other Democrats out of the party for being pro-life. I have seen Republicans kick Republicans out of the party for being pro-choice. So is there a middle ground? And if so, how do we get there without losing friends, losing families, being cut off from the church? Is it possible?
Well, I've got 3 quick rules, and I'll try and make them real quick. One
I'll keep time.
Treat other people with respect. Okay, I know my time's running out for tonight. Treat other people with respect. It doesn't mean we have to agree with them, but at least respect what they're saying and respect their ideas. The second thing is seek out people who hold opposing viewpoints from the views that you have and listen to them. and get in a debate with. The only people you ever talk to are the people who agree with everything that you say. And that's what's happening in society. That's what's happening in politics. We only talk to those people who agree with us. And so there's no dialogue with the opposition and the other side. And that's a terrible thing to have. And the third thing I would say is, what is it? I can't read my writing, sorry. Stop referring to the other side as the enemy. And that's one thing that's increasingly happening in politics. You see it all of the time, especially in national politics. The dialogue that goes back and forth. There's no respect shown for the other side. I mean, you literally call the other side idiots and morons, and they don't know what they're talking about. And we don't have to name names here who uses that more than others, but it's become a part of the political lexicon of politics today.
I have a simple solution. It's just called service. So if I go and I like, for example, to walk dogs, and I want to go volunteer at a local shelter, and then I make friends with Joe, and Joe and I are working together. When we finally have a conversation that is uncomfortable, hopefully our relationship will withstand that, right? And so I would say turn off and put work back into the community about issues and matters that are important to you. And then that is a way to give back. It's a way to learn about how what you're passionate about feeds into local, state, and federal politics. It's a way to firmly educate yourself about issues and then have conscious conversations with people and agree to disagree. That's a thing, and that's okay. And so I think the more time you spend with people doing things that matter, the less likely you are to feel that energy, doing useless things of going back and forth at each other. Life is short.
There's a community survey that demonstrates that what Kimberly was just talking about actually helps to increase, like, the more civically engaged a community is, the less likely that community devolves into partisan or identity-based violence. And there's probably 24 scholars across the United States who study this phenomenon specifically. And the other, we've been talking about all these rising, all these indices of polarization, but some really cool, promising scholarship is that what it takes to combat that is literally knowing somebody who has an alternative view from you that you respect. So having those difficult conversations after you form that relationship is really a powerful dissuader from having a person resort back to just like hyper-partisan talking points, which is pretty exciting and simple, right? Like that's something that we can all just kind of like think in my head. I go from a huge conservative family and from Louisiana, from like one of the reddest counties in a very red state. And it's really interesting. I was thinking, because I have, well, actually, my mom's side of the family, I call them city mice and country mice. My dad's folks are from the country, they're the country mice. The city mice, my mom's side of the family, they're all conservative. I'm not, I'm progressive, I'm a Democrat. And I still have really deep, meaningful conversations with my mom's side of the family. And it's more challenging to have those conversations with my dad's side of the family. And I've explored that a lot recently of like why that is, because I value family a great deal. And I come from a huge family. I have 35 first cousins just on my mom's side of the family. I'm telling you, we hunted Easter eggs in cohorts. Like we were And I was close to both sides of my family. And one of the things is my mom's side of the family doesn't use social media in the same way that my dad's side of the family does. And so they're not saying repeating or reposting hyper-partisan stuff I'm not in Louisiana anymore, so I don't have as many face-to-face conversations. So what's said online really impacts our IRL relationship. And if I died tomorrow, I would have a regret that I have lost these relationships, because I have some very sweet memories with these people who talk. I was also the first lesbian elected to higher office in the state of Florida. But like, they'll talk about the gay agenda and like keep it away from their kids, and I'm like, I'm reading this and I'm like, oh, like what, like just really kind of like, I know you don't think this way, like you'd never say this to my face. And so I just have made the decision that every time I go back to Louisiana, I take the time. I actually hide behind my 5-foot-tall mother, because it's actually impacted my sense of safety when I go out to visit my family. But it's like, you know, I'll like bring her along, because it's like I want to have a relationship. And even though their comments online have really, I don't know what's going on, guys, sorry. Even though I want to have a relationship. I remember when we did have a relationship. And so if they're not going to reach out to me, I can make the effort. My grandmother's getting very old. I would feel heartbroken if she died before we came back together and had a resolution to this. Even though we've never had a blow up in real life, we've never even talked about politics in real life. I mean, we have, but it's always been kind of, it hasn't been as mean or acrimonious as it is in the world of Facebook. And so that's what I have started to do. It's just like, okay, I'm going to show up in person, because you're not going to say that stuff. I can be brave in that way. I can be courageous in that way. I can reestablish this relationship. I've unfriended some of my family so that I don't see their stuff as frequently. I personally don't post that stuff. I think, would I say this about my family? Yes or no? If it's no, then I'm not going to say it about the other side in general. And also asking questions. So I can't be judgmental. It's hard for me personally to be judgmental and curious at the same time. You know, if you have a view that's different than mine, and I really want to understand you and your view, I'm asking questions, I'm listening, I'm not thinking about how I disagree with you. I'm thinking, wow, like what makes you get to that perspective? You know, it's exciting. I want to understand, like, whoa, like, really? This woman I served with in the legislature, we both were raised in Catholic schools. 35 first cousins, probably gave it away. I'm from a huge Catholic family. But we did totally different things intellectually with our raising. It is so exciting to talk to her, because she helps me articulate like what it is, the values that, where my kind of ethics and values that I hold dear, like how we just start to depart, and like, oh, well, so do no harm is really important, and beneficence. And for her, she's an attorney and a judge, and like she takes it in a different direction, in a more dogmatic way. She's consistent. Her positions come from a very earnest place. It's hard to deal with people who aren't earnest. But she is earnest in her positions, and we earnestly disagree with each other on almost everything. But it's really exciting to talk to her, because we have so much shared experience, even though we've done very different things with that shared experience. So it helps me to better refine my own positions and my own values that are coming to play that I might not even be aware of.
I tell my kids, hot potato mics. You know, my daughter will say somebody said something, whatever, and I'll say at any given time in the world, everybody is saying everything, or someone is saying everything. So the most crazy stuff you could possibly imagine is being said by someone at any given time, and it's up to you to choose if you engage with that or not. You know, and so that rule becomes, you have to earn the right for me to care about what you're saying, and how do you do that? So push that back over to understanding people's perspectives. A good example of this was when the mayor gave the bonuses to his staff. And Times did an article, they used the word huge bonuses. They didn't love that. That sort of set the ball moving. But as the comments came into the catalyst, it was, the chop was a terrible deal, therefore these bonuses are bad. Democrats try to give away our money, therefore these bonuses are bad. I don't like Ken Welch personally, he did something to me, therefore these bonuses are bad. I work really hard, I didn't get a bonus, therefore these bonuses are bad. Why do some people get bonuses and the Parks and Rec people? Because I care about nature, why don't they get bonuses? They did the hurricanes and everything, therefore these bonuses are bad. And so as you saw all of these people talking about bonuses, almost none of them were actually talking about the academic, are these bonuses are a widely accepted incentive measure? Are they legal and appropriate in the government? How much should it be? That's the conversation you have about bonuses. And nobody was having that conversation. So how do you go into that if you're not recognizing that and say, I'm going to try and engage with these people? Because they're all coming from completely different, they're just using the bonus conversation as an outlet for another thing. And so you're never going to come together if that's the case. So I think the minute you recognize that, you can take a lot of the steam out of it because you just see what's going on. It becomes like a 2-year-old crying. You see their inputs and you see their outputs, and you can lower your own, it helps you interact with them better, helps you understand them and talk to them in a way that you can see what matters to them, and you can inject what matters to you in a way that matches what matters to them. But the general overlying, the overarching sentiment there is just trying to understand perspectives, and then eventually I think we get to a place where there's that saying, people who can hold multiple opposing ideas in their head at the same time and make sense of them, that's intelligence. I think that's what's inevitable for us. Ideally, I'd love to see our leaders come and do that, because that's just what should be lauded. That you can see those perspectives and meld them in a way that everybody feels heard and feels good about it. And so just looking at it from all those sort of first principles, I think is something I do, and it seems to work pretty well.
I think it's important for all of us as human beings to recognize that's what we are to begin with, right? Human beings. Before we're Republicans, before we're Democrats, libertarians, socialists, conservatives, we are human beings. And I think it was Kimberly who said it, there's so much more that unites us than what divides us. And when we begin to let our political party become the dividing standard, we're in trouble, y'all. America is in trouble when we begin to allow differences in opinions to separate us. I think about my own family. Jennifer made me do some self-reflection. And in my family right now, we have aunts not talking to nephews. We have cousins not talking to cousins. Grandparents who have disowned grandkids in my own family because of political views, lifestyle choices. How do we move beyond that disconnect, right? Like, it's okay to have common ground because we share these lived experiences. And Jennifer made a great point. She served in the state house with someone from the opposite side of the aisle, but they found common ground with their upbringing. They were raised in the Catholic school, in the Catholic church, in a Catholic family. Now, whether they agreed beyond, that's okay. They were able to find common ground. And just like Jennifer, my best friend, he's a Republican. He's my balance. When I have conflicting opinions about political issues, he's the one who I call when I say, hey, how does MAGA feel about this, right? What do Trumpers think about this? I respect his opinion. I value his opinion because it helps expose my implicit biases. Helps me see things from a different perspective. And that's what I want to talk about. How do we move beyond the tug-of-war? That psychological, that sociological, that ideological tug-of-war where it's us versus them. Does it really have to be us versus them? I see Kimberly reaching for the mic, so she's itching to say.
I don't have a lot to say other than it's a decision. It is always a decision to show up the way you want to be received. It's a decision. In every room, in every space, in every relationship you value, it is a decision. It's very simple. How do you want to be received? And how do you want your relationships to be defined I am firmly in the space where I have to engage with a lot of people in the public, but at the end of the day, as one of my friends in the audience knows, I'm going home to ride my bicycle with my husband in our beautiful city along the water and enjoy life, you know. I'm not going to sit and watch television all night long and get in a heated debate about nothing and then go to bed angry and frustrated and blood pressure elevated over something that, you know, in the scheme of life is not for your day-to-day, every day, all day long living. You know, it's a decision.
Kimberly made me think about something, and I know Jennifer's gonna say this, but we are what we eat, right? If we sit there all day and night consuming Fox News and watching CNN all day, eventually we're going to become important that we broaden our horizons and that we open ourselves to differences in opinions.
And having conversations, just to have conversations, not to try and convince. I mean, I think that, you know, like making that decision, it's a decision. Like, I am just going to have a conversation with you to get to know you and how you think better, not to try and convince you of something or of a position. And I'll tell on myself, I think that that's easy in a lot of areas. I think when it gets hard is when it feels like the position held by the other person is an existential threat to me or to my community. And so then what I found that has helped, because I find myself in those situations quite a bit. I call it, you know, being courageously vulnerable or courageous vulnerability. And it's telling on myself, hey, I don't know if you know this, but when you celebrate the passage of this bill that I view as causing harm to the LGBT community, it makes me feel like you don't understand how dangerous it is for me and my family right now. It makes it hard for me to want to relate to you. And actually saying that, like, it makes it hard for me to want to show up in this space and even want to understand. And so I'm constantly having to tell on myself because I work with one of my co-leads on the Carter Center project is a Southern Baptist preacher who is also a Republican. He's very, very conservative. He was still very excited when a lot of those bills passed the legislature that, you know, that reviewed books and that, you know, made it harder for trans folks to get health care and all of this stuff. Things that actually made it so, because I work for Equality Florida during session, it made it so unsafe for me that a national organization reached out saying, hey, we're going to help you bulletproof your house. Oh my God. And so, but having those, because I was showing up on lists of people who were easy targets. I mean, that's not even like, that's not, oh, I feel scared. That's like, shit, my name is showing up on these lists, and you're celebrating the stuff that is actually causing my family to be less safe. And there's no easy answer there. That's not an easy conversation. And also, that's not a conversation that can be had in 5 minutes. And I think that in a world where we're always so busy, I make a decision not to step into conversations that should take, if I do them well and really am present, an hour and try to have them in 10 minutes. Because it just isn't going to happen. And so we never got to a resolution. He was still happy. I was still making plans to get FYI, hurricane-proof windows can also deflect bullets, in case you want to know, things that I never wanted to know, but now do. There was no resolution. There was just uncomfortableness, but within a 5-year relationship. And so it's something that we still refer back to from time to time. and it's just a point where it's like, I don't know where this goes. And it doesn't necessarily have to go anywhere, because he personally didn't take a vote. He didn't make a vote, he did celebrate it. He doesn't celebrate things quite as vociferously around me anymore, but I don't know that he doesn't act celebratory when I'm not around. I don't know that it matters. I think it matters that I speak my truth and do it in a way that doesn't, derail relationships that I have. And so that's what I can bring, that's a decision that I can make. But it is complicated, and I think that it's important to acknowledge that it's not just the talking heads on Fox News or on MSNBC. It's also like things where these hyper-partisan politics are triggering in a way that sometimes do have real results. And so how do we show up there? And as full humans, not just intellectual humans, but also as an emotionally feeling humans, Like how do I make myself vulnerable in this space so that I'm not also betraying myself by saying it's okay. It's okay that you're celebrating. Oh, we're just different. Like, I know I don't feel that way. I feel a certain way about your celebration. And if you're my friend, you can hear that. And if you're, and I can still show up and be present with you, but in a way that's even more authentic.
Thank you for that. And Jennifer just exposed something that is true and it's real. We have people who, although we celebrate our unity, we also have people who celebrate division, right? People who thrive off of hatred in this day and age. And thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable, because I too, 5 months into this political arena, I started speaking out about the lost cemeteries that were found over at Tropicana Field, many of which are African American graves. And I received a hateful email that told me, we know where you live, and if you keep talking about it, you're going to end up underneath that parking lot with them. And it just exposed, again, how polarized politics can expose mental illness, right? Not only will it make me mentally ill, because everywhere I go and whatever I do, I'm thinking, is this the person who sent me that email? Or should I look out for myself? Do I need security now? But also the fact that people are sitting, like I said, behind keyboards, and they are threatening people who are servants, right? Public servants. And here we are, all we're trying to do is just serve our communities, but we have people who are thriving off of division. Kimberly?
I wasn't going to respond to your question. I wanted to respond back to Jennifer about purposes of conversations and goals, the goal of engagement. Like, what is it serving you? So in some cases, the goal of engagement is really important, like with your family members, for example. And sometimes the goal of engagement is important because it's your job and you have to. And then sometimes it's just not important at all, right? And so I think that is very, I have my husband and I, he's used to me throwing one of those, we have firmly different philosophies almost about everything. Yet we've been together for 30 years. But the truth in having conversations with him is, at the end of the day, your ideological makeup was shaped different from mine, although we have so much that we have shared in common. And there are things that I'm not going to be able to change about you. And there are things that you're not going to be changed about me based on our upbringing, our geographic differences, our religious, upbringing, our thoughts and philosophies about our career paths, things of that nature. So goal of engagement. So, I think it's different what you all just brought up just now about threat and harm, which is a serious conversation that should be addressed. Because you can firmly not agree with someone or agree with someone's lifestyle or agree with what they did or the ideology and not want to cause them harm. I think those are, different conversations that I just wanted to make sure they shouldn't be conflated,
Civil dialogue. I think that's what's needed, being able to have conversations without having to threaten someone.
Right. Well, I mean, but human nature dictates that some people will be that way, right? So I think that's the more important question, is how do we coexist when we have firmly different thought processes about life?
All right. I'm gonna. Hi. I was wondering if this is gonna work. If you have not checked in, or you do not have a bookmark, you're going to come to me and let me know. On the back of the bookmark that you received is a guideline on how you can actually have one of these conversations. If you are ready to have a conversation that has a little bit of structure and is based on some positive results in research that gets the needle forward when you're using this model. You can also wing it, if that's been working for you. But that's on that, so you can please see me. Right now, I am going to ask that we take a break in groups. So take care of what you need to take care of, and perhaps find the group that you did your check-in with. You're just going to find a couple of people. We're going to give you an opportunity as a group to ask the panel a question. You're going to do that through a QR code that we're going to give you as you go out. Just for the sake, there's a saying, I'm going to question you guys now. So somebody in this audience better have the right answer. There's a phrase that you don't judge a book by its cover, right? And that really has been, one of the guiding principles of my life. Like, just because somebody is wearing red doesn't mean that they voted for Republican. But you're like, yeah, there you go.
You're
right?
good at this game, Corey.
That's how quickly our brains make associations these days, as what somebody is wearing, what somebody looks like, how somebody's presenting themselves, that must mean they have some ideologies back there, right? That's what I'm here to break, because that's been like centuries of stereotyping and biasing that we could break. Out there in the lobby, we've got something that is called a blind date with a leadership book. Because you do judge books by its cover. That's why they make covers. We want you to judge them. So you quickly don't think about it and you buy it. And so we have books out there that are covered, and they're leadership books. And they were personally donated from a leader that I know of about a book that was very significant in his or her life. And they wanted to bring that into our curated community library. So if you want to purchase one of those books, about 80% of them are new, because they didn't want to give up their old one, I guess, or they didn't want you to see what they wrote in them. And some of them are used, but they're blind for a reason, right? So that one of the best things I can tell you is, yes, it's great to have conversations with people that think differently than you do. It's great if you thought differently once in a while. And how we can do that is through art, is through writing, is through reading. And this book drive is just one opportunity for you to do so tonight. Okay, so time to take a break. Again, I'm going to ring that fabulous bell. You're going to be salivating when I ring it. We're going to come back in here and see what other questions we have for the panel. So we'll see you in about 10 to 15 minutes.
Asking questions from the audience. And so I feel a little bit like Oprah, y'all. I'm reading from my card, and we're going to have some conversations, and I might get up and start walking around with the mic and letting you guys engage with us. Would that be okay? Yeah? So the first conversation, again, I'm going to open it to the panel. How do we discern truth from fact, or are they one and the same? And if I can start with Joe on this one, I don't think you had an opportunity to chime in the last time, so I'd like to kick it off with you. How do we discern truth from fact, fact from fiction, or are they one and the same?
So, I mean, that's a multifaceted answer, obviously. One is, like, I'll go back to perspective. So, you know, truth, you know, the old example is this is a little ruder example, they say an elephant, but a house, you know, if you look at a house from the front, from the back, from the inside, from space, through a microscope, asking the person who lives there into their home, you're going to get very different answers, all of which that have truth, that may not be truth. You know, truth of what a home means to someone doesn't mean that to the builder, you know, or the architect. It means to the people who live there. So that's one. Number two, really look at motivation. And I'm kind of loath to say that because motivation is not necessarily a bad thing, but it does give some color. You know, people do a lot of work in studying some foundation, and they come up with some answer, and people just want to discount it because they say, oh, this is this foundation, this is what they do. Doesn't mean there's not some truth in there, right? But motivation does play into that as well. Especially if they're, you know, they have something to gain specifically. And then, you know, otherwise, sometimes it doesn't hurt to just take a step back and go, does this make sense to me, right? Because you can, you know, these people, you wonder how they show up at a pizza joint in Washington thinking there's a pedophilia ring in a basement when there's no basement. It's because they got rabbit holed, right? And so be careful that you're not going down a rabbit hole, because one of the things, you know, going back to those proxies, is how they're so effective is they set context, right? They build the reality within which you then figure out what's true. And if your base underlying foundational assumptions have been manufactured for you, then a lot of weird stuff can seem true inside of that little world that's been created for you. And then education and research.
It's important to be able to discern, right? And I think this day and age, I think you were the one who mentioned it earlier, Joe, about proxies, right? You have so many different mediums that are out there putting news or information out there. So how do you discern between what's true, what's fact, what's fiction, what's just made up just to get clicks, right? I call it clickbait. And it's very difficult these days, I think, because it's hard to discern who's telling the truth.
Find a good political science professor, and they'll distinguish truth from fiction. A lot of them can do that. Some of them don't always do that. They don't always serve the public well. But couple of quick examples here of truth and fiction. I don't know how well you can see this, but if you can't, it's essentially a map of the United States. And it looks very red. And you might say, well, what is this? Well, this actually came from the 2000 presidential election, Bush versus Gore. The red areas are the counties of the United States that George W. Bush carried. The blue areas are the counties of the United States that Al Gore carried. You look at this map, and you could make the conclusion, obviously, as many Republicans and conservatives did, is that it was a landslide for George W. Bush. As we well know, the 2000 election was hardly a landslide. And in fact, Al Gore won more votes than George W. Bush, but you wouldn't know it from looking at this map. Once again, just because the way things look aren't necessarily the way they are. You have to know the information and study the facts. Not only, well, that's a whole other thing. I actually testified before the United States Civil Rights Commission in January of 2001 on alleged voter irregularities in the Florida 2000 presidential vote. And it was a very interesting hearing. There were 4 or 5 political scientists from not only Florida but across the country who testified about all of these voter irregularities, you know, the butterfly ballot and the dimpled chads and the pregnant chads, and you know, we had all sorts of problems with the balloting. And there are problems with voting machines that affected the outcome. But one of the problems that I mentioned before the Civil Rights Commission, they weren't real thrilled about it, was that the end result, I think, they essentially got right. There's no doubt that Al Gore won more votes in the country than did George W. Bush. There's also no doubt in my mind that Al Gore would have won more votes in Florida than George W. Bush, but for the fact of these voter irregularities. But the voter irregularities were not due, as oftentimes was implied, because of techniques by the Bush the Jeb Bush administration on behalf of his brother, the irregularities happened in the 4 counties that the Democrats challenged originally before the United States Supreme Court and other courts. And these were Democratic counties, Democratic strongholds in the state of Florida. And it was the Democrats who made the election ballots in those cases that caused so much confusion. For example, the butterfly ballot. One of the real problems there were instructions were given, vote for one candidate on each page. Well, in the 2000 presidential election, there were 12, 15 candidates running for president. And you can't put all of those names on one page, so they were spread across several pages. And so if you read the ballot instructions, vote for one candidate on every page, you voted for 3 or 4 presidential candidates. And people would say, well, I didn't mean to vote for them. I'm just following the instructions. I mean, my vote was for Al Gore. But when you do that, you know, Florida law is quite clear. If you vote for more than one candidate for any political office, your ballot doesn't count. And so the end result was Gore lost. It was 28 days later before we knew. Then, of course, the Supreme Court put a final end to it with the Bush versus Gore decision, saying that it was too late in the process to continue the count of the vote. Others disagreed. Al Gore did, but he gave the most magnanimous concession speech ever in the history, probably, of the presidency. And say, I disagree with the decision of the United States Supreme Court, but they have ruled, and George Bush has been selected the President of the United States, and he's not only the country's president, but he's my president. And that's just a tremendous statement to make. I mean, can anyone imagine some guy named Donald Trump making that kind of statement? I know I'm not supposed to mention names, but so what? Sorry. You all know who we're talking. But
Professor, I want to bring in Kimberly and Jennifer in this conversation just to ask, there was something that was stated earlier, I think it was you, Joe, you said things aren't always what they seem. We have to know information and we have to be able to educate ourselves on the facts. So Kimberly, bringing that back into the conversation, or the original question that was posed is, how do we discern fact from fiction? How do we do that while recognizing the fact that everything ain't always what it seems?
People aren't gonna like this answer. You really do have to take your time. So for example, we were, for work purposes, I was at a seminar today, and a lawsuit was mentioned. And so I was Googling the lawsuit, but I was Googling the lawsuit not for the articles that were discussing the lawsuit, but to find the actual complaint, so that I could read the actual complaint. Now, I'm not suggesting everybody's going to go through those types of levels to figure things out, but primary resources are at our fingertips. We're at the height of an era where you really do not have to listen to someone in their feelings and thoughts. You can actually do your own cross-references and take the time to do a deep dive. I mentioned elections. You can go on the Pinellas County Supervisor of Elections website, and there's significant accurate data going back decades. You know, someone mentioned something in the catalyst, for example. You can go through and, you know, pull up information related to the subject matter of what topic comes up. You can source from a lot of different articles, which is important. For fun, but again, I'm a nerd. For fun, you can listen to Supreme Court cases. It's actually very entertaining to listen to different perspectives from the lawyers who are making this, who are arguing before the highest court, and you know, trying to make points relevant to what the Supreme Court ultimately decides. They're usually great spaces to educate yourself. There are a lot of different primary sources or non-biased sources that are, for some, boring and may take a little bit longer, but it is important to do your own research and not take the proxy at their word.
That's right. Yeah. I'm thinking about like these QAnon theorists, Jennifer, and I'm thinking about, you know, all these other things like Truth Social, right? You have so many different mediums. What's truth and what's not?
Well, I think that, one, it is important to ascertain what is true and what is not. I think that all information isn't equal. Someone said about opinions like, you have to earn the right for me to respond to you. And I actually really like that. There's a lot of dignity in that approach. And so, and not all opinions are equal. I mean, if Kimberly did all of that research on that court case and actually went to the primary source, I'm probably going to take what she has to say and ask for a quote and take her opinion a little more seriously than I would someone who is repeating the talking points from the newspaper article, from the short synopsis, or the text that I get, throughout the process. I mean, it's important to know where people are deriving their information, and that we do have information. I think that that's a very good use of all of this instant information that we have, is that, she said you can make a decision. Like, you can decide if you're just going to go down a rabbit hole watching a bunch of YouTubes, or if you're going to go to the primary source and make the decision to read the paragraphs and to break that seal and to realize that actually it's not that hard to read a court case. It's not that hard to read a statute. Find the subject and verb and object. It's like law school a little bit, but and it can be noble, and once you do it once, it's like a lot easier. Or ask a trusted friend, Or I love, if I'm not willing to do the research, I don't talk about some stuff. I don't add to the noise. I don't say, well, it's probably true because this guy's a jerk. I just say, I haven't researched that yet. I really don't have an opinion. And that has a lot of dignity, that kind of response too, because it's like, I don't need to add to noise. I'm not interested in what in tweet wars going back and forth, or Truth Social, or all this other stuff. That's not, if I see something on social media, I immediately open up a new browser and Google it and see if I can get to a primary source or a legitimate news source.
And too, you can watch him on the St. Petersburg channel. You can watch.
Yes.
You can watch them in Tallahassee. You can watch them in DC. You can watch exactly what they're saying. You don't have to watch it in real time. You can turn it on when you want to and put it in the background while you're working and learn about what was actually said instead of watching the soundbite.
Fact check. Pointer Institute does a great job with that. Joe, do you have something?
Yeah, just because I mentioned that you have to earn the right. I talked to my kids about that, and actually the second side of that is I have to earn the right to give you my opinion, because I feel like I might respect and care about what 3% of the people say because they've earned that right. Equivalently, you have to be equivalent. I should really feel comfortable talking about 3% of things. And I get invited to talk and stuff all the time because of Catalyst. I say no to almost all of it, and I came to this because I felt comfortable talking about the subject matter.
And I think it was Jennifer who said it. We have to recognize that we can't force people to make these decisions on their own, right? To have that conscious decision of whether or not I'm going to start this conversation or engage in this conversation. But the next question is, and I want to lead into it, is how do we create brave spaces that may not necessarily be built for everyone without burning out or compromising our own healing? And this makes me think, it might not be our responsibility to educate everybody about their own biases, but is it our responsibility to create those spaces, to have those spaces where people can engage in that courageous conversation or that uncomfortable dialogue?
I mean, in general, when I hear the term difficult conversations, I kind of reject that term because I think that that's a decision that you make that is difficult. I've always believed that depth of connection is a gift, and if someone, if I sit with a plumber at a party, I'm going to come out of there knowing as much about plumbing as I possibly can because it's just kind of cool. This is their depth that they have to offer you, and anything they say only becomes difficult if I let it be difficult. Otherwise, it's just depth. And if you appreciate that, Obviously if someone has emotional drive to come at you and you have to just suffer that, it puts it into a different category. But I almost feel like it takes two people to make a difficult conversation, in theory, in a perfect world. And if it's not difficult for you, then I think, that energy to some extent impacts them, because if they keep coming and you're just not, and at some point you stay pragmatic and you recognize your own, emotional drivers and keep them in check, then that's about as much as you can individually do. I think if over half the people do that, then you don't have difficult conversations anymore. Difficult's a choice.
So true. We choose to be difficult. Professor?
No, I think that's an individual decision more than it is something that others can do for you. I mean, you have to be willing, if an issue concerns you, you have to be willing to engage yourself to a certain extent and fight the battle yourself. I've always been involved in a lot of different community activities. I was very active in the Tiger Bay group here in St. Petersburg for 25 years, served as the president of that club twice. I was a member of what was called the Fair Campaign Practices Committee in St. Petersburg and chaired that committee for about 5 years. I was a guardian ad litem and represented kids in court who had been abused and taken away from their parents. And that was a very difficult job. I mean, I dealt with cases where some of the kids ended up dead. And it's a heartbreaking situation. But somebody's got to do it, and if not me, who? So, I mean, you have to be willing to put yourself on the line and do it yourself. But I still think, to a great extent, last 30 seconds here, I promise, you have to know what you're talking about before you can engage in any kind of political battle if you expect to be successful. I would ask my students in my various classes, I said, you don't have to give me the exact number, but what was the population of the city of St. Petersburg in 1900? What was the population of Pinellas County in 1900? And what was the least populated state east of the Mississippi River in 1940? Now, they may seem like stupid questions to you, but they all relate to the courses I taught. The least populated state east of the Mississippi River in 1940 was Florida. People can't imagine that because it's the third most populated state today. But that's how rapidly Florida has transformed itself from a small, relatively rural southern state to one of the real urban political powers in the United States. What was the population of St. Pete in 1900? 0, because St. Petersburg didn't exist. It wasn't a city. It was before it had even been formed. It would be another 10, 12 years before the city of St. Petersburg came into existence. What was the population of Pinellas County in 1900? 0, because it didn't exist. It was part of Hillsborough County until 1912. And so Pinellas County was formed out of the ribs of Hillsborough County. So it's almost like a biblical story in itself.
Thank you for that history.
I would say if someone asks a genuine question because they have an interest in learning something, then I will respond. Back to, I don't have an obligation to respond. But if someone is just coming at you just to be argumentative for the sake of it, and then you can simply say, well, respectfully, I don't want to talk about this. So there are innocent inquiries, I think. Everyone grows up in different spaces with different people, there are different access, and of course that shapes who you are as a human being. So you may genuinely have a question about another human being but for engaging with that human being, you would not know. And those are fair questions.
What was the question?
Question was, sure. How do we create brave spaces within spaces not built for everyone without burning out or compromising our healing?
I think the good thing about building something is it takes more than just one person. So like you can kind of set it up, but then you invite others and they come and they're all committed to the shared idea of having conversations across difference, let's say. And then if, for instance, when I was having this interaction with my co-lead in Florida, I took a step back the space didn't collapse in on itself. I just took a step back to take care of myself. Everybody kept meeting, and that's really okay. And I think the spaces, brave spaces, are really desired right now. So you don't have to hold them tight. You can hold them dear and step away and take care of yourself as you need to, and trust that folks will continue to show up because it's something that is really needed in our community right now.
I think there's an order of operations too. Global example for St. Pete for me is why we started building communications rails, because it built efficiency. They say, in business, and trust is the big lubricant for efficiency, and then the mechanics of it. But if you go into a conversation and first seek to build trust, first seek to build a bond, that lubricates the rest of it. And so I think there's an order of operations. I think if people can go in and create the bond first, it's the same thing when you talk about people who hate others. Closeness cures a lot of that most of the time, right? Not all the time. And so the trust and the bond builds closeness, and it's so much harder to have those distance-friendly keyboard warrior type conversations when the person's right there looking you in the eye. So put yourself in that situation, start with trust, start with bond, start with empathy, and just makes the rest of it go a lot smoother.
So philosophical. I just want to give this panel a hand. Can we clap? I see you, Dr. Krystal. I am blown away. I have so much that I feel like I can just soak up in my book of life that you all have given me. So I thank you for these nuggets of wisdom that you've deposited.
Don't let them go yet, please.
We won't. We're going to turn it over to you now.
Hold up, You guys gotta keep being wise. He's gonna let you off the hook, but I need a couple of minutes. I'm gonna ask you guys all a question now, and then perhaps they'll also want to chime in. So, cancel culture, right? It's not new. I can tell you how I know. It's because when I was in middle school, I wore those French Prince of Bel-Air pants. You all have them too.
Jogging pants?
Yeah. You know, with the wings on them? Okay, I was canceled, right? And that's super funny, because like now looking back, I'll probably wear them in a couple of years. I should have held on to them. But it was like I'm a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, lots of years, and I'm still talking about it, 2025. It was painful in a way that I never want to be canceled again. And we didn't invent it, right? I think America has a long history of cancel culture. If you just look back about maybe 50 years ago, Professor, the Communism Party, so what year?
Early 50s, 52 to 53.
Okay, good. It's always great to ask the professor. What year was that?
52, 53?
Yeah. Okay, so that's where we're at right now. And that's what we're here for, not to have the past repeat the future. Otherwise, we need more psychologists, because that's how our assumptions work, right? We just put the past into the present moment. So my question to you, because we always turn it to the audience for an audience question. You guys have to answer. Somebody has to answer. You're not going home. Have you experienced being canceled or canceling somebody else because of their political ideology? And how would you handle that now? What advice do you have for us in the room about cancel culture? Any takers?
Got a hand over.
Yeah, hey, my name is Tommy Lacey, and I'm sure I've been canceled, but like the response I want to give isn't about me being canceled by others. It's canceling my own opinions and voicing them, because I do tend to play devil's advocate. I love to debate, and the response is so frequently so inflammatory. If I say anything from the other side, I said to someone close to me not long ago, would it be okay if I said something about Trump that wasn't bad? Or something, it was something phrased like that, like to say it registered in my brain, that to say a non-negative thing about Donald Trump would possibly infuriate this person. I'm like, what am I living in? Like, I want to be able to speak freely about different people and not have, my biggest taboo is taboo. And there's become so many taboos that if you dare to mention a single name, now there's so many different Voldemorts now. And it's just, it's a weird world to live in where people get so inflamed and so enraged that we can't talk. And so just like my Facebook changed when my Aunt Loretta first added me as a friend. I know was no longer was that college student doing crazy things. It's like a family member's in here. Now my voice has changed and I'm afraid to just have discussions. So having a night like tonight where we can have discussions and try to be in that level where we can communicate civilly with each other is really important. So I'm grateful for this experience.
So you're doubling down on my question, right? How do you handle cancel culture? Somebody have an answer? Right? I'm gonna go.
Hello, I'm Evan. I canceled my own mother. And that was repaired once I checked myself and realized that I was, even though I still stand firm in my belief that I had stated to her originally, I still recognize that I came from a place of emotional, maybe I was hungry, I don't know. Yeah, just checking myself. Check yourself.
Does the panel have an answer? Anybody else
want to
wanna
chime
chime
in there? I will say, I know, to your point, Tommy, I was on council one day. Really, you can play it back and watch it. And I invoked the president's name. Just mentioned his name. And I got chewed up by not just people in the community who were there, but my own colleagues on council. And when did we get to that point where, like you said, you can't even mention the name of the President of the United States without being crucified? So,
Canceling is a power game, and it's the modern equivalent of the built into our biology, and this is how it expresses itself in the modern world. So I think recognizing it for that is important, and also I think in the example that Tommy gave. Well, I mean, there's a dominant emotion there, and the underlying problem is that if you're in a plane and it's going down, you don't want to talk about how pretty the upholstery is, right? It doesn't mean you don't think the upholstery is nice. It doesn't mean you don't think Donald Trump may have a good idea. It means this dominant emotion of the plane going down, or this energy you have. Donald Trump overrides everything, and the need to express that overrides everything. And again, recognizing that for what it is the first step towards handling it.
Yeah, and to that, I think, I was hoping there we go, easier. I prefer like calling people in to calling people out. So, if somebody says something that's a little off or that's like super rooted in strong emotions, which might be hindering their ability to connect and communicate with others, instead of clapping back, pull aside at a different point in time and be like, hey, sounds like, and have the conversation and choose to connect authentically instead of shutting them down, instead of canceling them, instead of shutting them up, or honestly, it's just public humiliation, right? And I think that for me, it's important to ask myself, is this, when I'm engaging with folks, leading with love and compassion, and really having a compassionate heart and just being okay, assuming good intentions. You don't have to assume. I get to choose whether I assume bad intentions or good intentions from someone, even in the political climate that we're in. So I can have both things be true. I can give people the benefit of the doubt, but not abdicate my responsibility to delve a little deeper if I'm responsible for a space and say, hey, what did you mean by that? Or you were really you were really wound up about this, or do you know that when you said that it actually came across as this in this way, and I don't think you intended it, but what was going on for you? These are all conversations that we can have, and they're probably best had not in a group setting, not in an online setting, but one-on-one, or at least in an instant messenger, not posted on their Facebook page, And we have these skills. We know how to do this. Humans have evolved in a collective. Our ability to thrive and continue on an evolutionary scale depends on our ability to get along and to collaborate and to cooperate. So we know how to foster these bonds. We just need to choose to do it.
Okay. So it's hard answering questions. So the question I'm going to pose to the panel, and you all will answer, I'm going to also pose to you. So I'm going to hold silence for like 10 seconds. It's going to be awkward because most of the time when we're in things like this, we just want to hear people talk. So the question is, what if you could do one thing differently? What would you do to change where we're at today in terms of this tug of war? What would you do? What can you do and what would you do? So just take a minute. What recommendation would you have for somebody else about what is actually possible? What's one thing each one of us could do? So no, just take a look. Yeah, well, you say it to yourself. So take a second before I hand it to our panel for you to answer that question for yourself. What would you recommend for you to do? One small action. And I'm going to, whichever one of you wants it first.
To me, the answer seems obvious, which makes me a little bit worried, but speak up. If you don't speak up, who's going to speak up? Don't look at the person next to you. I taught a course in civil rights. The most courageous people that I can think of in the history of the United States, to a great extent, were the people who were engaged in the civil rights movement and really went into the worst places. And a lot of people know about Martin Luther King, and of course his life ended in an assassination. But there were other heroic figures who went into the worst areas in the South, in Mississippi and Alabama, Louisiana, other places like that, put their life on the line. Many of them lost their lives. Florida had one of the highest incidents of violence with respect to civil rights of any of the southern states. On a per capita basis, Florida ranked the second highest incidence of violence during the civil rights movement. And probably the most stunning example was in the early 1950s when the head of the NAACP in the state of Florida and his wife were killed when a bomb was placed underneath their house in Mims, Florida, and both of them died as a result of that. And nobody was ever found guilty or convicted, which was something that oftentimes happened in the South. Even if you knew who did it, you couldn't convict the individuals. So you have to speak out. I mean, the people, obviously in those kinds of situations, that's almost the worst example. He said, well, the fear, I don't want to end up like they did. But if you don't speak up, who's going to do it? Nobody. And if nobody speaks up, the situation's going to continue. And that's exactly what happened for a long time, until enough people got together and said, we can't take this anymore. We've got to do what we can do and not worry that much about what the others are thinking about it.
So, for me, everyone has a moral compass. So my grandfather was a minister. So I have a strong moral compass based on what was taught in my value system, based on watching him and his sacrifice in the community. And I live by the words he says. It's be accountable. You will enter this world alone and you will leave it alone. And whatever that accountability means to you, you should live by your moral compass. And so what I would ask people to do is be accountable. So everyone has an inner voice that says if what they're doing feels right or is wrong. And you have to be accountable to that voice even when you don't agree and you have an interest in doing something else. So accountability, I think, is very important in society.
I guess a tactical answer would be, and it's kind of theme of other things I did tonight, is just treat interactions as a multivariate exercise. If there are two dogs, and every time you pet one, it bites you, and another one licks your hand, can't just say, this is a mean dog, it bites, this is a good dog, it doesn't. That dog may have been beaten or may have been trained to bite you because there's a reason for it, and that dog may have had a loving home. And the more you understand that, the more you then, there is a path with the dog that bites you to have it not bite you anymore and have it become your friend if you understand where it's at and you act appropriately. And so that's the variables that line up to help you make those connections. And I would second the be accountable. I think if you, this goes back to starting to build a foundation of uncancelableness, right? Anti-fragileness. And you can stand up and say, I'm authentic to my inner voice, this is my name, this is what I'm going to say, and say that with complete comfort. I think you're almost, halfway being uncancelable. And, the more people who do that, again, it takes more than one person to cancel something, right? Because somebody has to do it, someone has to take it, and other people have to jump on and agree to it. And if you start to pull the Jenga pins out of any of those, the more you pull out, eventually that stuff falls down.
Some really good answers so far. I think, I actually agree with everything that's been said, and I think for me, it's, I'm in spaces where people are talking about difficult things often, and I'll use difficult because for me it's like, I know that we're not going to agree on this. It's a little, it's something that's that's harder than being in an echo chamber where everybody's just bobbleheading and shaking, and we're kind of trained to do that now through social media. All of our channels are very curated to have people just shake their heads yes back at us and then amplify what we're saying. And what I've witnessed is people either speak truth or they just agree because they don't want it to be disagreeable. But there's not a lot of people who disagree agreeably, who just say, oh, I just don't agree with you. And who don't get that surge of emotional response as they're saying that, who can simply say yeah, that doesn't sit right with me, or that's not my truth, or I don't agree for these reasons. And I think that committing to having those conversations where even if it's fewer conversations, but with truer depth and with that accountability and authenticity is what's needed right now. Because the more we have these conversations and the more we speak to one another across difference, the more bridges we build. It's really needed. Because we are dangerously close to having widespread panic, widespread violence over the next election. And so the consequences are serious and severe and widespread. And each of us can be a bridge. And to peace, and that is conversation. Like I said earlier, when people are asked what their perception of the other political party is, members of the other political party, their responses are kind of exacerbated about how bad the other side is, until they're given an example from their own life of someone who is in that political party that's different from their own, and then they immediately soften. And so we need more soft ground right now in our country in order to make it through to the other side of the next election. Well, maybe not the midterms, more the general election, the presidential election in 4 years. So, yeah.
It's important that we build those bridges, and it's bridges that not only we can cross, but others can cross. Right? I know for me personally, I wish I could talk less and listen more. I had a wise grandfather too, Kimberly, and my grandfather told me, he said, God gave you one mouth and 2 ears for a reason, right? So for me, I think I could build more bridges if I did a little less talking and a little bit more listening, because I could find common ground with other people. I could understand where they were coming from. I could relate to their perspective if only I just shut my mouth and listen to what they had to say.
I hope that wasn't directed at me.
I'm listening to everything you got to say.
He was looking right at me. So, your boundaries become you. And our boundaries have become us. And if we do anything, we need to shift some of our boundaries and be willing to give up some ground and to maybe take some ground. Some of us have to closed boundaries and some of us have too loose. But we're asking you to consider the boundary of leadership, which we have outsourced to authority figures. And we have outsourced leadership to someone that we elect, or we select, versus someone who is inside of ourselves and someone who is literally right to your left and to your right. They are all here in this room, and the panel has not a panacea. If you've listened tonight, the solution is you. Changing your boundaries. So thank you for being here tonight. If I have your email under free leadership, not personally, but if free leadership has your email, I'm going to be asking the panelists to give us some resources, and I'll be coalescing them and organizing them to deliver to you, I'm going to say by 5 p.m. on Friday, about some of the themes that we talked about tonight. Some of the questions we didn't get to tonight, they have. And I'll ask for some resources from them, and then we'll give them to you. And some of them you'll find useful, some of them you already have, and some of them, just won't be yours. My ask of you is that you would send what we give to you to at least one other person who is not here today. Hey, I went to this. These are some resources I got. Let me know what you want to think. I'm going to be around until they tell me I need to leave. So if you need to talk to me, I'll be here. I want to say thank you to my collaborator and partner in crime for this specific event, Shane. He did way more work than I did. It was uncomfortable. I want to say thank you for American Stage and for all of you on the panelists who say no to things and you said yes to this. That's how it works. All right. I want to say stay safe, stay healthy, and stay connected. We'll see you another time.